Hey, what up? It's your boy DSV2 here. Today, I just kind of felt like talking about some opinions that I've had throughout the week. Of course, unless you've lived under a rock, it's probably going to be mainly this whole like moist critical Sneako drama that's been going on. I'm going to preface this by saying that I am not a commentary channel. I'm not intending to become a commentary channel. I don't know where I fit in the whole YouTube zeitgeist. I'm just kind of trying to discover myself as well. But I really empathize. I really empathize with a lot of what Charlie was saying in the sense of like his YouTube channel kind of being like a diary for himself, just talking about things that interest him and why he doesn't really like engaging in debates and stuff because they're kind of counterproductive and it a lot of times end up being one side trying to talk more confidently, more condescending, or have like better arguments than the other side and trying to earn more favor and becoming like the victor in the discussion and discourse, which I entirely agree with. I like conversation as well, and I feel like I identify like a lot of what he was saying. So just in saying that, I'm not going to be doing like a whole lot of commentary in the future. The only reason why I'm talking about this right now is because I've seen a lot of response videos and I've seen like a lot of comments and like read through a lot. And I don't want to say that I have like a different opinion, but I sort of have like a perspective coming from a place that I haven't seen like a whole lot of other people discussing it like within. So I feel like I can actually like add something to the equation. So that's kind of why I felt like talking about this time. So right off the bat, first of all, I just want to like ask a very sincere question because I'm honestly curious. Is there something that the government can do when someone such as Sneako in this case openly admits and advocates to having like a predatory ideology? Because I just feel like they should step in and maybe put like a restraining order on him to not allow him within a certain radius of parks and schools where children and teenagers are. Because everything that he described just sounded dangerous. I'm going to be getting into why I think that in a second, but I'm honestly curious if they can, because if you can just, straight up prevent stuff like that from happening when someone admits to it openly, I feel like you should. And for anyone who is actually on the side of Sneako, please explain why, because I am entirely curious on like how anyone could form that opinion. And I understand the idea that just because you're uneducated on something, and I'm not saying that I'm like super educated on developmental stages and what is a child, what isn't a child, and like the moral debate about like if revolutions around the sun can truly encapsulate what like age actually is, because maturity operates differently. It's like, yes, you can form opinions on things when you're uneducated, because the second something enters your mental real estate, like you're going to be generating thoughts based off your perspectives. It's like, I get that. But I just feel like it's a different story when someone's advocating and incentivizing other people to feel the same way, especially when they have like a larger platform and audience. Like, it just seems crazy to me. So if you agree with him, please enlighten me. I'm curious. So when it actually comes down to their like discussion or debate, whatever you want to call it, a lot of what Sneako was trying to describe was the idea that maturity isn't truly representative of what's going on with someone's age, because people sort of age at different rates. And once someone's physically mature and they've gone through puberty, and suppose that they're old enough to be able to get on the road with a license and a car, it's like they should be old enough to marry. And it's like, it's just straight up wrong. It's just wrong. There's no debate about it. It shouldn't even be a debate. It shouldn't be in question. And the reason for that is because there have been developmental psychologists sort of doing critical analysis and understanding about these things for years and years and years. We've got people like Jean Piaget, Erik Erikson, Albert Bandura. I'm pretty sure even B.F. Skinner and Freud have like done stuff within developmental psychology. Like Freud's a little bit weird with it, but like still, there's been enough actual peer-reviewed research and critical analysis that's been done on these things. So when someone arbitrarily decides that, yeah, I think someone's physically fit and mature enough that they should be able to get married, it's like that is just not a perspective that you should have. That is very predatory behavior. And it's predatory, particularly because you're totally ignoring teenagers exist. Someone doesn't go from being a child, going through puberty, and then becoming an adult. There's a whole age bracket of teenagers that exists. From 13 to 19, teen is in the name. And you could like make the argument that, okay, well, that just exists in the English language because teen's in the name. But maybe someone becomes an adult at 18 and it's like, well, what does that count for? And it's like, still, whether that's an arbitrary decision or not, and like maybe that like argument doesn't hold water or whatever, there's still enough research to indicate that people go through specific stages at life during that time period. And maybe it's not exactly the same for every single person, but just because you've justified in your own head that someone's physically fit and mature enough to handle marriage doesn't make it the case. And the reason for that is because teenagers are going through puberty. And even though you exited the puberty stage, you still have hormones that are going wild, you're still inexperienced, and you still have to go through these sexual urges that you have. And I know maybe that's like a rough subject for some people, but it's like, still, that is what's happening in a lot of teenagers' lives. And when you're an adult, you have better critical thinking, better executive function, better reasoning, you would expect. So when someone's trying to take advantage of the sexual urges that teenagers have, that is predatory behavior. That's why you're a sexual predator. And when you're advocating that, for that to be like okay and acceptable, it's like, no, that is why it's against the law. Because you're taking advantage of the naivete of teenagers and children.
Naivete.
It's wild to me that someone can have that perspective and feel no shame or guilt in expressing it to a large audience. Like, sometimes I have perspectives on things. I can't really say any off the top of my head that, like, I'm like, I feel a little guilty for thinking this. But it's like, I don't know, then I move on with my life. But it's like, to actually think that, go onto and broadcast it in a debate with someone, and not in a debate where you're trying to play the devil's advocate, but like you fully believe in it. Like, that's crazy to me, man. That is so wild. And I totally forgot to mention, too, this whole perspective of, like, once they're physically mature enough, they can just get married. And it's sort of predicated on this, like, idea that, like, marriage just sort of happens. And it's like, no, marriage just doesn't just suddenly happen. It's like marriage is pursued through romantic interest. So that would be predicated on the idea that an adult would have to look at a minor with romantic interest in mind. And that can come in like very many shapes and forms, but it's like, yes, it's an active pursuit. It doesn't just like suddenly happen where it's like, yep, they're mature enough, time to get married, and then they can start like, learning about each other and like exploring their lives together, having sex and bearing children or whatever. Like, it doesn't just randomly happen. It's an active pursuit of like exploration between two separate people. And it's like, it starts with that romantic interest, or possibly even like a sexual interest. In a lot of cases with adults and minors, it's the latter, which, like, just his whole idea about it is like, again, it's predicated on this idea that if I find them physically attractive, then I should be allowed to pursue it. Which, again, is just so wrong, man. I don't get it. I truly don't get it. But that's about all I had to say on that. I just felt like talking about psychology. I think people should look more into like Erik Erikson. I think that a lot of the stages of life that he's sort of bracketed out are like very fascinating. I think Jean Piaget is also like a little interesting. It's not quite as like interesting to me, just as far as like it's broken down more for like children and stuff and teenagers, but it's still interesting to research and look into. And then I'm pretty sure like most people know like Albert Bandura and like the Bobo doll experiment stuff. Like, you've probably learned that in high school, maybe if you've taken like a high school psychology class, or maybe even like a sociology class. Like, maybe you could have discussed it in there too. Like, probably not, but I don't know, maybe. It's just, it's interesting though. A lot of it is very interesting. So something else that I kind of wanted to talk about too is in Charlie's response video, he talks about like a lot of people slam dunking on him for being a fence sitter on a lot of things, and his whole response to that is like, I'm a human being, like what do you want from me? And I completely agree with that, and I'm also curious to engage people more on like why being a fence sitter is such a bad thing. Like, why does that make someone the enemy of the world and like the internet and deserve to like catch the ire of like people's responses? Because I myself habitually am a fence sitter on like most things. Most things come into my mind, I develop like a very small opinion or perspective on it, and then I just kind of like move on because like most of the time I just don't care. And I feel like that's normal, and I just feel like posing the question of like, do you as a person often go through life with the idea that all of your thoughts, perspectives, and opinions are objective truth because you've thought them? Because if that's the case, like that's batshit crazy to me. That is wild. To go through life with that level of certainty in everything that you think and believe, like, I'm truly envious about that because I question most of the things that I think, and I'm a very open-minded person, and I love being like presented with new and novel information that I haven't heard before on things that like I am eager to learn about. Like some things I'm just not that interested in, like, and that's okay. Not everyone needs to be like open and inviting to all pieces of information. Like some people are probably better off sticking to their lane. But I just feel like a lot of people have this it's like I guess I want to say like a lot of people have this mindset where, and maybe this is where it comes from, that they see someone with like a larger audience and it's almost like they have a thought and an opinion and they need for that person to express a similar thought or opinion to affirm their beliefs even further. It's like people trying to further dig themselves into a better echo chamber of like these larger voices sort of exclaiming from the mountaintops of like, yep, it's okay that you think this and you're correct because I have a larger audience and I believe this. And I'm like, is that what's going on? I truly don't get it, because I often am like very centrist on most things. It's like, I don't know. I'm curious to see what people think about that. If anyone even like watches this, like, I don't know if people will or not, but I get the sense that most people, as soon as they click on my videos, click off almost immediately because I don't have an audience. But I'm curious to see what people think about. So this is only like tangentially related, but I also wanted to talk about one of the people that I watched that responded to the whole like Cr1tikal Sneako debate and debacle was Omni. If anyone's ever watched him, I really enjoy a lot of his videos. I love his like chill atmosphere and just sort of like discuss it, and that's just kind of the end of it. People sort of present him with information about like, hey, what do you think about this? And then he just talks about what he thinks about it, and it's very relaxed, and I love that. One thing that I would give like a little bit of pushback on, and fully appreciate the guy and what he does, but at the end of the video when he's talking about Cr1tikal and Sneako and that whole like thing, it's very inspiring. He talks about having goals, setting goals, and sort of like achieving goals, and the way that he discusses it is that you almost have to be like obsessive with your goals. And that's sort of the part where I'm like, maybe push back like a little bit, because advocating for people to be obsessive over their goals is almost like telling people like, hey, if you want to achieve certain things, it's like you almost have to be willing to drop everything and almost develop like an OCD like behavior where you're only ever focusing on the thing that you want to achieve and sort of ignoring all other obstacles, which could be fine in very specific circumstances. And this is where I would like to present to people like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is like the pyramid, where at the top you have self-actualization, and then sort of like in the middle tiers you have like the loving and belongingness needs, as well as like self-esteem needs. And that's probably more of like the bracket of where he's talking about becoming like obsessive with the things that you want to accomplish. But then I have a feeling that a lot of people might hear that and run with it, but they might be at like the bottom tier of their needs being met. And I don't mean that to be like as a slight to anyone, because like I've certainly been there where certain people have like their safety needs that aren't being met. Like maybe they don't have shelter, they're not getting enough sleep, Same with like their physiological needs. Like maybe they're having like poor access to food, and they're sort of using this mission of becoming obsessive over their goals as almost like a pseudo escape to deal with like their real problems. So just in hearing that and like hearing him discuss it, I would just like urge people to be like on the side of caution of, if you are in like a desperate situation, please like seek help, or like formulate your goals surrounding like those needs first, because that is going to help you out so much further in the long run, rather than focusing on life achievement goals of like things that you maybe want to like tackle that are like further later down the line. And I also understand a certain perspective too of like, sometimes people are in college and it's like, yeah, you want to get straight A's, but you're also like on the struggle bus. And like, I get that, and I've been there, but I just felt like sharing that because that's a perspective of hearing someone advocate for something where I'm like, I don't disagree, but I feel like maybe it should have like an added disclaimer for the people that might be in a particular like perilous situation in life where maybe that isn't quite the right message that they need to hear. You know what I mean? So yeah, that was basically it for this one. Those are the things I felt like talking about, just some opinions that I've had throughout the week, and some things that I felt like adding to enlighten people on maybe some like other perspectives. I don't know if it's going to be interesting to a lot of people or not, but it's just something I felt like sharing. So at the end of the day, that's about all that you really can do, right? So till next time, guys, peace out.